on, and we wait for the signal.
Okay, hello everyone.
It's setting up.
Gökberk, so?
Okay, wait, go.
Okay. Hello everyone. We have such a distinguished guest today here in our live lecture, Steve LeVine, and we will talk very exciting subjects with him. So we have a huge area to cover, from batteries to the hopefully oil and the future of energy. And thank you for joining us. Steve LeVine is the author of Powerhouse book. And when I read the book the first time, it was quite interesting. And during that time, after I read the book, there was a World Energy Congress in Istanbul. And I met some of the heroes of the book, that US team during the World Energy Congress. And it was an interesting one. So these are discussion topics that we aim for today. And with that in mind, let me introduce you Steve LeVine. And Steve is a very interesting character, and he's very intelligent. You can watch his videos from the internet. His forecasts are brilliant, and he worked at Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, New York Times. He's currently senior fellow at Atlantic Council and adjunct professor at Georgetown University. He's also editor at large at Medium. He has written books, and he has written lots of articles. The Powerhouse, Putin's Labyrinth, The Oil and the Glory are the most famous ones. His articles, I advise you to read his articles on Medium.com, because he's writing about how this COVID-19 will change the entrepreneurship, cities, urbanization, and he's still writing about batteries. So he's one of the characters that I take inspiration when making about future forecasts. So today we will talk about the Powerhouse. So we will give Steve some time to explain about his book. Then we will talk about the lithium technology and where it will going, and how Tesla, Elon Musk is dealing with it. What may we expect in the next 2 weeks, possibly? What are the challenges, and about the future? And we would like to ask about Steve LeVine's ideas about a post-COVID-19 world, how it will evolve, whether energy transitions will occur, how oil companies will be affected. So ladies and gentlemen, I enjoy to let you meet with Steve LeVine. Steve, how are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Thanks, Barish.
Let's start with the Powerhouse book.
Okay, so I'll just launch into just a little thing about it. So before we started, I was just talking a little bit about why I got interested in batteries. They are something that most people don't think about. And when I got interested in them about a dozen years ago and proposed a book about them, I was advised by most people not to do that. They just were not an interesting thing, and you wouldn't sell any books. But I did anyway, and the thing that made me interested was the financial crash. So when the economies around the world started to collapse, presidents and economists were looking around for what could be the next big businesses, what could be the real industries, not shenanigans, not financial shenanigans, that could be the basis of the next economy. And around the world, in about 20 countries that I counted, electric cars and batteries became one of the answers. The United States, Germany, Japan, China too, all of them decided they were going to be the country that mastered lithium-ion batteries and electric cars, and they were going to make these two industries into gigantic money makers, and one of the centers of their economies. Well, now we're a decade later, and we're on the cusp of finding out whether they were right. So most of the major automakers have electric models coming out later this year and next, and there's much more to come. So far, only Tesla has made substantial sales, but Volkswagen has made the electric car the basis of its entire future. And the thing that has made electric suddenly feasible as mass market products is advances in the lithium-ion battery. They've become astonishingly cheaper, much more powerful. And over the next few years, what's going to happen is that electrics and gasoline-driven vehicles are going to be similar on price, so that motorists, when they walk into a car dealership, they're going to choose their car based on taste, not on price. You're going to be able to decide, do I want this car in electric or in a combustion engine? And there's going to be almost no difference in the price. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes describing the trajectory, how we got from there to here, and then we'll talk about what's coming next. So the first thing to know is that two blockbuster inventions are responsible for the entire information revolution of the last 3 or 4 decades. The first is the transistor. That was invented in 1948, and that's the essential breakthrough that gives us silicon wafers that are the heart of every electronic device that you have. The phone in your pocket, your laptop, your Fitbit, and the second is the lithium-ion battery. It was first commercialized in 1991 by Sony for its handheld Betacams, and since that, it's responsible for allowing electronics to go mobile. Without the lithium-ion battery, you wouldn't have your iPhone, you wouldn't have your laptop or your Fitbit, or the whole economy that's built around these inventions. Uber, Airbnb, food delivery, mobile pay, the companies WeChat, WhatsApp, Amazon, and the banking revolution in Africa. All of these are built on a platform of the transistor and the lithium-ion battery. But back then, when I started to look at the battery, you couldn't foresee much of this because lithium-ion was so expensive. Super surprisingly, the very first breakthrough in lithium was made by an oil company, Exxon, in the 1970s during the Arab oil embargoes. The oil companies were flailing around for other businesses, and Exxon heard of some path-breaking work on batteries at Stanford University and hired 2 of the hotshot young academics behind it. This wasn't the first time that batteries became a big thing. Back at the beginning of the 20th century, so a little over a century ago, Thomas Edison tried to produce a mass market electric car. And he put out word that he was interested if any inventor had a battery, a rechargeable battery, a light battery that he could put in these cars. The nickel battery resulted, but it was way too heavy and way too expensive, and he moved on to other his other inventions. put aside the car. But lithium is super attractive as an element because it's the lightest metal on the periodic table. The problem is that it's highly volatile. It catches fire really easily. But one of Exxon's Stanford hires, Stan Whittington, figured out how to turn lithium into a tiny battery. And Exxon actually produced a beta of a first small device using the battery, but then it abandoned the project toward the end of the 1970s when oil prices started to go back up, and it didn't have to rely on these other businesses. A few years later, around 1980, an Oxford researcher named John Goodenough picked up the idea and invented the first rechargeable lithium-ion cathode. The cathode is the essence of the battery in almost every smartphone and laptop. His cathode. It's the nerve center of the battery. Last year, Goodenough, Whittingham, and a Japanese researcher named Kira Yoshino shared the Nobel Prize for chemistry for this invention. But still, if you were thinking of more ambitious uses for the battery, like for an electric car, it was still far too expensive. It was way too heavy, and there was also the volatility problem. No one was going to get into an electric car if they feared the vehicle was going to catch fire. When I started working on the book, this is 2010, lithium-ion, the lithium-ion battery cost $1,200 a kilowatt hour. This is the measure, that's the metric that's used. The goal, if electrics were going to reach comparability with the gasoline-driven car, was $100 a kilowatt hour. That's more than an order of magnitude improvement. This objective was named at every battery conference I attended, but no one seemed to think that it was really possible. It was regarded as an absurd aim. But spin forward to now, commercial lithium ion is around $150 a kilowatt hour. It's a startling improvement. And the forecasts are that they're going to dip below $100 in the next couple of years. Barish mentioned that in a couple of weeks, Tesla is going to have Battery Day. This is in the second part of May, and a lot of battery researchers think that one of the main announcements that Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, is going to make is that he has either reached the $100 kilowatt hour threshold or will soon. This, if he does that, that will mark the inflection point between the sort of aspirational electric car age and the real electric car age. This is when we're going to find out whether people want them. And we can talk about this later. This is a big moment for electronics, for this new industry, but also for the oil industry. Obviously, if electric cars take off, if people decide that they want a quiet ride, for example, oil prices, which are already very, very low, will crater further. I want to go a little bit into some of the questions that Barish asked me to talk about. And one of them is I use this term battery wars in the book, and this is The competition for to make this big breakthrough, the super battery, which is what I call it, that is the breakthrough that gets you $100 kilowatt hour, pitted the biggest nations on the planet against each other. You could compare it on a less existential level to the competition right now to create the vaccine against COVID-19. Japan, Germany, France, Israel, Britain, the US, of course, China, Australia, all these countries, researchers in all those countries have vied to be the one to make the big breakthrough, and to make the big breakthrough not just in the battery, but in the electric car that people will buy. And so these are the battery wars, and so far publicly what you're seeing is that Tesla is the big winner, but underneath a subtext of this is that China sells more electric cars than any country on the planet. The difference is that they're all sold inside China. It's an internal product. China has not managed to create a model that attracts, that is of the quality that attracts a mass market in other countries. Another question that Barish raises is this: what is NMC 822? So I'm going to risk going very technical here, but it is a very interesting thing. So just taking that apart, why are we asking this question? Because the breakthrough, if Elon Musk announces this breakthrough at the end of this month, this is at the core of that announcement. NMC is one of the battery formulations, one of the main battery formulations. It stands for nickel, manganese, cobalt. These are the three major elements in the cathode of most electric car batteries around the world. And the 822 refers to how much proportionally of each one of those metals is in the battery. The objective of battery researchers is to try to reduce the amount of cobalt in the battery and increase nickel. The first lithium-ion battery, the one that John Goodenough invented, was almost entirely cobalt. It's just called cobalt oxide battery, lithium and cobalt. But this is, cobalt is heavy. It's a great element to use in the battery. It's a stable element. The battery will be useful for many cycles, but it's volatile. This is the element when you've heard of or seen a smartphone or a laptop catch fire. This is the cobalt. It's usually the cobalt. So that's one reason why battery researchers have tried to reduce the cobalt. Another reason is its cost. It's the most expensive single thing by far in the battery and in the whole electric car. So if they can reduce the cobalt, they reduce the price. And the third reason is where it's from. Most cobalt is from a single country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. No one wants to rely on a single country. That's one thing. And there are human rights issues that have made cobalt a very controversial element. So for these reasons, for the last few years, battery researchers around the world, one of the big aims is to reduce that. So the problem though with reducing cobalt is when you're relying just on nickel and manganese, the batteries are unstable. They stop working. Cobalt has been an important stabilizing element, and but researchers are, I mean, it's a very secretive world. The stakes are very, very high. So you're not getting from the researchers how they're reducing the cobalt, but they are. 822 means that it's 8 parts nickel, 2 parts 20% manganese, and 20% cobalt. It's very, very low. It's a very surprising advance. But even more surprising is that it looks like, and this is a actually that shouldn't be 822, Barish. That should be 622. It's the obviously, because 6 and 2 and 2 equal 10. So right. So that's my mistake. So the new batteries that are on the market are 811, 80% nickel, only 10% cobalt. And what I'm hearing is that Tesla has managed to make a 9, 0.5, which is out of this world and in incredible advance. 90% nickel, 0.5% manganese. It has a little bit different formulation. In the Tesla battery, it'll be 90% nickel, 0.5% cobalt, and 0.5% aluminum. If they're doing this, this is why their cost is reduced so much. Barish, what should I go to next?
Well, if you want, you mentioned something called super battery. The super battery is this, I believe you didn't define it, but you explained what the super battery is.
Yeah.
And the other one is about the Nobel Prize. Do you personally interview the Nobel Prize winners before you write the book?
Yes. So John Goodenough and Stan Whittingham are both characters in the book. Goodenough is 97 years old. He invented his big invention. He was 57. This is inspiration for all of us, right? I mean, yeah, to make, such a world-changing invention near an age where a lot of people retire and still be working. He's still working right now at the University of Austin. And Stan Whittingham is a professor on Long Island, and he also continues to invent.
So the Nobel Prize is something like a testimony to your thesis that lithium-ion batteries are so much important, isn't it?
Well, it really is. I think it's indisputable how central the lithium-ion battery is as an advance. It's one of those inventions that's important scientifically, but has become so important economically. It's a central actor in our global economy and in the future economy too. And I think this is, you don't just win these prizes so people campaign for it, right? So there are people campaigning. Some of it was were there's romance about someone of good enough's age, still working on this. So out of sentimentality, he was a candidate, but also there was recognition, yes, about how important these batteries have become.
About the solar revolution, with the renewables and distributed generation and battery storage become even more important and more strategic maybe. And we are seeing that, you looked from the automotive perspective, and as energy sector professionals, we look from the distributed energy side.
Yeah.
So can you change your perspective a little bit and look from energy transition, distributed generation, and the prosumer perspective a little?
Yeah. So first, let's start with large scale energy, solar especially, but also wind have reached a critical mass, a scale. Most new power capacity in the world that's added every year is from solar, is from wind. So this says everything. And but they're still intermittent. What do you do when the wind isn't blowing and when the sun isn't shining? These two renewables, they need an added technology to make them a real central actor in global electricity, and that's storage, that's batteries, and so at that scale, you need to reduce lithium-ion. There are a bunch of other types of batteries too, by the way, that are used. But if your objective is to reduce the use of fossil fuels, coal and natural gas, then you have to bring cheap storage in. It's not there yet. There's a big difference between creating a battery for an electric car and making these enormous batteries that would need to be installed everywhere electricity is produced.
All right. One question maybe linked to it is the previous oil crisis has triggered this battery developments, not revolution, but developments. Now we are in the midst of another kind of oil crisis. I would like to comment on you later on, but I would like to hear your ideas about whether this moves, because Exxon's shares are shambles and other, will initiate another clean energy technologies revolution or thing. Then I will ask you about Tesla and others.
Yeah.
Let's start from this market.
Did you say will it initiate what kind of revolution?
Another clean tech revolution, another clean tech story.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you might think the opposite, right? Since oil is so cheap, natural gas are so cheap, why should anyone buy an electric car? Right. Oil is if you adjust for inflation, is much cheaper than it was even during the 70s. And so but I think that's not the right way to look at it. That most people, when they're buying something, a big factor is the price of the actual product. So people who have used this logic, the kind that you're advancing here, have said that oil prices have to be very, very high to make electric cars a mass market vehicle, because people have to make the decision that it's much cheaper for them to plug in than to fill up. But I don't think that's how, that isn't how people don't walk into a showroom with a calculator and figure out how much they're going to save over 5 years by not using gasoline. They're looking directly at the sticker price. The sticker price has to be it has to be the same or almost the same as the combustion car, or they won't buy it. And this is where we're reaching. When we get to that point, which looks like it's very, very soon, that's when we're going to know whether people want electric cars. But what and I know you said you wanted to talk about Musk later, but let me just give a little taste now. So what has been his magic? So it's very similar to what Steve Jobs did with the iPhone. Steve Jobs didn't invent the smartphone, right? There have been electronic devices, handheld electronic devices were invented in the early 90s. He made them cool. He made a design that everyone wanted. In my house, no one, they will not even think it's heresy to even think about owning any other phone but an iPhone. And there are hundreds of millions of people around the world who think this. And look, I'm talking to you on a MacBook Air. I guarantee you, in your students they're all dispersed. Most of them have one of these. So, and this is why, because of Steve Jobs, because of his design. That's what Elon Musk is doing, and it's the mistake that GM is making. GM is one of the most important innovators in electric cars. It's very hard to believe because the American car makers, Detroit, have been so flat-footed for 3 or 4 decades, making these boring cars no one wants, but GM created the Volt, a hybrid electric car in 2010. That came before anyone had such a car, and actually beat the Model 3, the Tesla Model 3, by about 7 months with the Bolt, a very, very good car. But they look like your grandmother's car. No one's interested in these, and style is very, very important. And I think, I know the concept cars that you're seeing, the German car makers, BMW and VW come out with, these could compete. And if people walk into a showroom, it's the same price, it's a cool car, then they'll buy it.
I think in one of your speeches you say about Tesla's competitor is the BMW 3 Series. Isn't it? So electric cars is not much more about emissions, not about other things, but more about taste and I think design and consumer acceptance, isn't it?
It is. I've changed my mind on which. So I think that his competitors are the Germans. Okay. So pick your car company, but VW, the VW and Toyota alternate as the biggest car makers in the world. VW owns Porsche, Audi, and so these are side by side comparable in terms of these kind of supercars that Musk makes, and they bet the whole company. VW made a big mistake with Dieselgate, fixing the cars so they look like they're meeting emission standards when they don't, and this has cost them. I've lost count, billions and billions of dollars. They almost lost the companies. The CEO and the very senior executives could go to jail for this. They've been charged with criminality. And so to remake the company, they bet on the electric car. And so if you were to ask me, who's the Tesla and VW.
And when you look at this socio-economical transformation of lithium-ion batteries, it looks like it took 40 years to get to today, isn't it? It took too long to come to this point, isn't it?
Well, so this is a big difference between the silicon wafer and the battery. So silicon follows a rule where every year and a half, Gordon Moore's rule, every year and a half it doubles in capacity, and so it's they're super smart. That's why that's why we have this. One of the big reasons why we have the revolution that we have. Batteries are very, very slow. The cramming of more electrons into a small space, and in a way, think about the car. You want your car to go for a long distance. Maybe for you is 500 kilometers. I don't know what do you and your wife, if you're putting your wife and your children in a car, you don't want to hear that it broke down someplace, right? That it ran, right? You want to feel safe. Your children are safe in that car. What is the amount of kilometers? What should be the range that makes you feel that way? And it's a psychological thing. I think it's around 500. But you may have a different thing. But you also want, when you're driving the car, you want to be able to, if you're in a fix, somehow someone cut in front of you, or you just need to accelerate fast. You want to be able to press your foot on the accelerator and you immediately get acceleration, good acceleration. Well, these are two different things. These are electrons, a lot of electrons staying for a long time in the battery. The acceleration is the electrons moving fast. These are two conflicting objectives in the same battery. And the third thing you want is you don't want your wife to call you and say that the car caught fire. Right. So that's another thing. So the electrons have to last a long time. You don't want them to go anywhere, but actually you do want them to go somewhere. You want them to move really fast, and you want them not to catch fire. So these things are the. I'm sorry. And the fourth element is you want all of this really cheap. Right. And so that's been the challenge. These compete. And so no one, there's every year you hear, what is going to be the superseding technology from lithium-ion? What's the next thing? And you mentioned in your note solid state. Yeah, this is the one thing, one of the ones that's discussed, but no one has figured out how to make solid state work. And so yes, if researchers figure out the solid state battery that does not require electrolyte, then batteries, you get the safety issue right away, because electrolyte is the thing that catches fire. And second, you get much more energy, because suddenly you can use pure lithium in there. It's not just little bits of lithium. But lithium, even though it's been 40 years, no one has figured out anything better. That's the thing. All these other batteries that you talk about, this is one thing I'm sure you remember, most people remember about the book, is Thomas Edison being so frustrated with the proposals that he got for batteries for his car, big promises that didn't deliver. And he would call battery inventors liars. So the first thing, you become a battery inventor, you become a liar. And it's a very hard thing to do. So what's happened, just to loop back, is you've gotten 7 to 8% capacity improvement every year over the last 10 or 12 years. And all that has been little tweaks, engineering tweaks, a little bit different amount of manganese or cobalt, a little bit of tweaking on the anode side, a little bit of tweaking in the cars themselves. Elon Musk's team is very good about managing the battery. That the electronics around it that make it work, and that's given you. But if you add 7 to 8% and compounding that over 10 or 12 years, you get, it looks like we're going to have $100 per kilowatt hour very, very soon.
It looks like there's this incremental innovation that Elon Musk is investing in. He's not with the side of the argon guys, I believe. He just takes off-the-shelf batteries and uses them. It looks like more disruptive than a disruptive battery technology, isn't it?
Well, so argon is, so the two competing lithium-ion formulations are NCA, that's Elon Musk's, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, and NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt. NMC was invented at argon. And so, yes, Elon Musk is the leader with his cars, but everyone else, the Germans, the Japanese, everyone uses the NMC. And so you're right. Elon's big advance was he bought off-the-shelf batteries that Panasonic was already making and figured out how to engineer those better. It's an engineering advance.
And then when you change the batteries, you change lots of things. For example, power sector, mobility, and everything. So we come to Tesla. Tesla practically started as a mobility company, isn't it? But now they are a solar company. Now recently they bought a license in the UK. We have seen some patents that Tesla has applied for about microgridding the house, etc. One conquers the batteries will conquer the whole power and mobility sector, isn't it? So they are playing on it.
Yeah, that is his game. It's well, no one is absolutely sure what is Musk's whole, but because he's also doing Mars, right? Mm-hmm. SpaceX and neural net, the
boring company was
sorry, and the boring company, right? So boring under cities, turning us into cyborgs with neural net. But yes, but the Tesla part of it is it's roofs for houses, those beautiful roofs. Solar power. He installed a residential solar power in Australia successfully, and then these cars. So he's a very controversial figure, and people love him or they hate him. And I've got friends who just, in fact, Argon people at Argon, a lot of them despise him, and it's about his promotional side, right? So he's one of these people who gets up on a stage, and it's not something that you can understand. I mean, he's not a great speaker. He's kind of fumbles around and his gestures. He's not Steve Jobs, right? A masterful performer, but somehow he's an electrifying speaker, right? Those fans of his are in the stage. It's like being at a rock concert with him. He's holding a battery day. It's one of the most anticipated events of the whole year around battery. Who could do that? There's no one who ever has done that. These battery conferences they have a maximum 100 or 200 people. All of them are battery nerds. No one knows who they are. Elon Musk is holding this event, the end of this month, Battery Day, and you know, the Wall Street, Silicon Valley, people in batteries and cars, journalists that are all talking about this. And this is his showmanship.
And before starting to the other chapters, other parts of our talk, let me ask you, how do you see the future of battery technology and the market? And if you have some money, $1 million, will you invest in battery storage? No, there are some bad, like Tesaros as well. There's some bad entrepreneurship examples too. So what's your vision for battery tech?
Yeah, so this is a good question. So there are a lot of naysayers about both lithium-ion and about electric cars. I would say most analysts think that that electric cars are a niche. They are never going to be any bigger than a small part of the market. And the defense of that argument is one of it is cost. Another is the size of the global fleet. The existing fleet is 1 billion cars are on the road right now, and so the idea is 1 more billion will come onto the market by 2030 or 2035. But the argument is that people own their cars for so long that even if electric cars take off, it'll be a long time before they are a large part of the market. So I think this is wrong. So I want to state first that as a journalist covering batteries and electric cars, I cannot and do not own stock in any automakers or like Tesla or any battery companies, or no companies involved. Like I don't own a cobalt company or a nickel shares like that. So I don't have a dog in the fight. But I think what people are missing is what these analysts are missing is right in front of their face, and one of them is the cost issue, which we've discussed. They've got old thinking. Batteries are electric cars are no longer going to be more expensive than gasoline-driven cars, and so this issue of demand is going to go away. It's an issue that's in the hands of the car makers. They have to cool cars, and it's very simple. And look at VW. VW has bet the whole company on electric cars. It is going to make cool cars. It knows. It understands that that in 2007 the world changed when Steve Jobs debuted the iPhone. It wants to be the next. It wants to create the next iPhone, and so we are going to have desired electric cars. It's going to be like an iPhone moment. There are going to be electric cars are going to be sold in very large numbers, and if you add autonomy, not full autonomy. One of your questions was, are we going to get autonomous cars? This is I'm saying this parenthetically and not breaking the narrative here, but the technology to create absolute autonomous cars, driverless cars, where you're just sitting back, sleeping or reading the newspaper, and the car drives safely to where you're going. That could be impossible. That may never happen. But between no autonomy and full autonomy, yes. So you're going to already, right? Your car is going to park itself. You're going to summon your car. Your car is going to work on fixed routes. like, there in every city, there are routes that are heavily trafficked, that there's so much data on, and those routes will, they can be used autonomously. And when that happens, there's going to be a psychological shift in motorists, and especially the biggest buyers of automobiles on the planet, which are who? Barish, who is the biggest buyer? What?
China, middle class.
Women.
Women, no.
Women are this is an under appreciated fact. Women, like your car, the car that you decided to buy, I can say we've never spoken, that your wife was a big factor in deciding, yes. And that it's the same thing in every family. It doesn't matter the country. And it's usually around safety and things like convenience.
Yes.
And so if women think that they're not going to put their children into a car that doesn't have autonomous capability, if they think that not having autonomy is unsafe, and suddenly you have a paradigm shift in the market, they will only buy cars that have autonomy. You make obsolete a whole range of cars that are in that existing fleet. So if you twin that limited autonomy, not full autonomy, and electric, which is generally how this is done, then you get this big lift in the sale of cars. So I do advise you and all of your students to and whoever's here to figure out it is a smart investment, some piece of this new industry.
All right, now we have two questions from YouTube about electric battery storage and others. Then we will, okay. I would like to come to the oil then. The first question is, when can we reach fully charging our car batteries in less than 5 minutes, like quick charging?
No,
never.
That's not happening. That's not happening. But it could be. When you fast charge, a supercharge, that what you're doing, you're putting stress on the battery. You're forcing these electrons into the battery, and that it's making them move faster than they want to move. And okay, you can do that a few times, and maybe once a week or once a month, I don't know, something like that, and it'll be okay. But if you keep doing it, you damage the battery. 5 minutes is absurd, but you could get 20 minutes. And there are advances. Tesla's main battery guru Jeff Dawn has invented has an invention that much reduces that damage that goes on inside the battery, and we'll just change. Our psychology will change from thinking that we have to go into the fill-up station for only 3 minutes. We'll park the car, we'll get out of the car, we'll plug it in, we'll make a phone call to someone, we'll get something done, we'll go buy a candy bar, we'll use the bathroom, and then we'll get back in our car.
Yeah. The second one was, how can we achieve to reform the freight sector, move fully to electric batteries? I think this freight sector, there's lorries and trucks. Do you think that is a possibility, or should we just pass to the hydrogen?
Hydrogen hasn't been figured out. It's another kind of battery, but it also has this problem with expense. It's another issue, also the infrastructure issue, placing hydrogen everywhere, around your country. How do you do that? So Toyota made a big bet on hydrogen. I don't believe in it. So I think we're talking lithium-ion. But in terms of trucks, of lorries, this is happening right now. And so you can imagine long range trucks using these batteries. Musk and Tesla, Mercedes, other companies are already marketing these trucks, but they're also taking a place in delivery vans. But there needs to be an advance to make these really work. The swappable battery, right? Where you park your truck, and some mechanism removes the battery, the exhausted battery, and installs a full battery, and then you take off.
One question more is, would there be enough metals and minerals to enable this transition to EVs? There's some,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, this is one of the issues that's raised. It's a good issue. And the other issue that's raised, are we trading one reliance on one dangerous
Resource
oil for another one, and that's these metals. But there are these, there's nickel all around the world. Lithium is all around the world. And what'll happen is first, there's plenty now, and we'll just recycle these metals. Right now, it's difficult to think about that because there are only trace quantities of the metal in every single battery, and it's not been economic to pull out these. How do you get just that small metal, and then what do you do with the rest of the battery once you do that? But this will be figured out.
Right, then this question about if you have written this book now, what will be different?
Okay, so the book has been out for 5 years, so I don't feel any compunction about spoiling the end of the book at this point. So the two threads of the book are a race. It's a race to make a super battery, but the race also is to make the first 200-mile car, because at that time, remember, electrics, like the BMW 3 Series was going 80 miles. The GM Volt was going 36 miles, and Tesla's, well, they cost too much. A few people had $100,000. So who was going to create a 200-mile car that would cost in the range that people could afford, around $30,000? And so GM was one actor in this, and then there was it was Argonne, the national lab, attempting to create the super battery, and a startup, NVIDIA, which you named in Silicon Valley. So my outline for the book had NVIDIA winning the battery race, because I had been in touch with them. I've been following them for 3 years while they were inventing this. They had a contract with GM. They had made this breakthrough, but about my deadline for the book was that December. In September, I got a phone call that NVIDIA had been lying about its breakthrough. It turned out to be let's just say fake news. It was fake, and so suddenly I didn't have this big finish. I didn't have that. So the book kind of ends, with this. Well, they did a lot. They didn't quite get there, but now, if I wrote it now, there actually is a big finish, right? So we're there, right? So there would be this moment with the $100 per kilowatt hour, Tesla right on the cusp of breaking through to the mass market, VW right on the cusp, China also right there.
So there's one last question from YouTube. I will not take any more YouTube questions. Okay, this one is about, would be other batteries such as flow batteries more feasible for large scale storage? So lithium for everything, or should there be different batteries like flow batteries for large scale storage for power sector?
Yeah. There's much, yes. So the thesis of this question, what's behind it, is correct. The difference between large scale storage and an electric car is there's no space problem. So a car, you've got to get everything into a small space. With large scale storage, you have whole deserts, and and so yes, so there are all kinds of different kinds of formulations, ideas of what are going to work, and it may be that there won't be a single technology that's the dominant technology for large scale, but this is going to happen. The distributed electricity, that is the future, and renewables in conjunction with storage, that's the future. We're not going to build these big power plants anymore and stringing wire across whole continents. That's the old model. And yes, flow batteries will be one of the ones that probably win.
Steve, since you are a good forecaster and I really seen your forecast in previous talks and others, so it's a duty for me to ask about post-COVID-19 world. The first one is, I think, energy transition, how it will be impacted by COVID-19.
Oh, wait, how will
energy transition? Energy transition, this energy transition of renewable transition,
yes.
Will it speed up or will it slow down after this COVID-19?
I see them as independent of one another. The motivation behind renewables is different from the dimensions of the economy, of social life that are changing because of COVID. The one thing that happened is oil prices cratered, natural gas prices cratered, but they have a propulsion of their own. Solar and wind, they're on their own track, and so I don't see any no difference in that. The big thing is what happens with oil. Yeah. If that's one of your questions, we can talk about that.
Yes, that's one of my questions. You see that in the notes I wrote about oil, Russia, and car industry. So these are the three things: oil, Russia, and car industry after COVID-19. Could you please comment on these ones?
Yeah. So we know very little about COVID-19. We don't know what it is. We don't know why some countries have been overwhelmed by it and their neighbor hasn't. We don't know why one country that naturally social distances, like the Swedes or Japan, don't get heavily hit by COVID, and then countries that culturally are very intimate, hug, kiss, but they also don't get hit by COVID. So the 1919 pandemic hit youth and left elderly alone. This one's hitting, so far at least, elderly and leaving youth alone. And so this question that you're asking is, we don't know how long this is going to go on. We don't know. There are promising vaccines. Will they work? And will they work everywhere? Is COVID going to stay more or less with the strains as it is, or is it going to mutate into something else? So all those questions need to be answered. But let's say we're kind of on the track we are now. I think the U.S. is in real trouble because we're not doing anything to structurally to arrest, to take control of the virus. The countries and places where we've got a normal future, more or less normal future coming up, are the ones that have established the testing, tracing, quarantining regime, right? Because they know who has it. When someone new has it, they immediately trace, they quarantine, and so this is the, you don't want to behave like it's the Middle Ages with the Black Death, where the only answer was to hide in your house and wait for it to go away. The U.S. is doing that. We've got a 14th century approach, and so demand for oil. The U.S. is the second biggest consumer of oil on the planet, and so if it's gone for a long time from the market, then the price is going to stay very, very low, and that that has an impact on the oil companies. It has an impact on the states, the countries that rely on that. So how long will Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE, Qatar, all the states, Iran, Iraq, petrostates, how long can they go, how many years can they go on and remain stable with oil at $20 or $30 a barrel? If it's 1 year, if it's 2 years, they already went through that. They did that in the middle of this last decade. That's fine. They did this around 2008, 2009. But if this goes on a long time, you've got a very unstable situation in your neighborhood. And then you asked about Russia. Russia has done very, very well economically by floating the ruble, which has been the key to them being able to pay off their debt, increase their reserves, so they're able to weather the current storm. They sell their oil for dollars, and then they're able to spend those dollars with cheap rubles to keep the country going. But what if this goes on for 5 years? What if it goes on for longer than in some form? What if oil prices are low for an extended period? Russia is going to be really stressed too. And so this is a real test. It's a test for all the OPEC countries, and it's a test for Russia.
The car industry.
The car industry. Well, again, if it depends how long this goes on. So if it's extended, you're going to see big car companies go bankrupt. They'll vanish. Remember that there were the Great Depression killed most of the car companies on the planet. Just a few survived the Great Depression. So you could have something like that. But by the way, that's something we haven't talked about. There are two crises going on. One is COVID, and one is the economic downturn. And I'm of the camp that thinks this is a depression, not a recession. And what's the difference? That's it's how long this goes on, and the two elements. So not just double-digit unemployment, but double-digit GDP contraction over an extended period of time. So the car companies, the car companies that have cash, that can keep going despite demand being low over a long period of time, they will survive. A lot of them won't if this lasts a long time.
Then let's come to the car companies and persuading their board members and shareholders. We should make this electricity transition. Can they say that easily? Because the car industry in trouble, then the CEOs, it will be harder for them to persuade shareholders for an electric car transition. Do you think so?
Yeah. Well, that is the devilish thing with legacy companies of all types. Very few big existing companies successfully make a transition into a new age, because mentally and economically, they have so many eggs in one basket. For them to think about throwing that away and moving into the next technology, that's very, very hard for them to do. So yes, I do think this is another reason why you get Tesla being such a strong contender going into this new age. And it's another thing. So you have VW. VW feels like it has no choice but to make this transition. So the chances are VW is a survivor.
So my last question is about your recent article on Medium about startups.
Yeah.
How COVID-19 will change the nature of startups, because we have thinking about startups will provide us with this transition and disruptive technologies so we can move forward. But I believe in your article, you talk about gig economy and then startups. And I think this became a disruptor, isn't it? This COVID-19 for them.
Yeah. Yes. So who are we talking about? We're talking about companies like Airbnb,
yes,
Grubhub, Uber, and there are others like that. And every region of the country, of the world, have their own copycat companies that are like that. A local Uber, a local Instacart or Flipkart, their own Airbnb. So what are all of these are based on their apps. They're based on a mobile phone, and they are disrupting another industry. Airbnb is saying hotels are too expensive. They're inconvenient. Here is a way for you to get inexpensive, nice, personal place to stay, very, very conveniently on this
app. And they
app.
don't own an asset. They don't have an asset, isn't it?
Right. So asset light. So Airbnb is a guy or a woman sitting at their desk with their laptop. That's it. That's all they need. And someone who wants to rent out a room in their house. Uber's the same thing. Some guy with a laptop, Travis Kalanick, and someone who wants to earn a few bucks, taking someone in the car that they own, right, to some place. And Grubhub, the same thing. All of them are based on that. They don't own anything, and they simply, and it's audacious when you think about it, right? They have compared themselves and in their valuations to the biggest, most storied companies in the world, right? GE, Exxon, GM, Toyota, name Siemens, right? They're as valuable as those companies. Silicon Valley has driven their valuations through the roof. But a bunch of things at the same time have conspired to tear down these companies. One is the realization that these companies they're screwing workers, right? Because they are taking a 30%, between 20 and 30% bite of every sale. The guy, all that person has done is insinuate themselves between the good and the buyer, and then demanded a 30% cut of that transaction. Well, if you're a restaurant, if you're a hotel, to lose 30% off the top, that's your whole profit. It's not only your whole profit margin, it's a huge cost for you. And so drivers are unhappy with the cut. They're unhappy with Uber, and they're unhappy because in a COVID situation, suddenly they're out of work because people are locked down. They're not taking these cars. But if they had been relying on Uber as their income, they don't have an unemployment scheme. Uber has fought with their lawyers to be defined as a technology company, not as a transportation company, which is absurd. But that then allows them not to categorize these workers as employees. And so Uber drivers have been left out in the rain. And the same thing with restaurants, with hotels. Suddenly people who had been like elderly people able to continue to buy their groceries, to pay their bills when they don't have a job, or maybe they don't have sufficient retirement. They had been renting the room in their home. Maybe younger people have been paying part of their mortgage, and then there have been people who actually have bought homes or rented, leased apartments based on the Airbnb model. Whole other companies. There's a company called Lyric, for example, that leases and furnishes luxury apartments built on the Airbnb model. All those people are suddenly also in the rain. How do I pay my mortgage if Airbnb isn't a live thing anymore? So that whole gig and sharing economy, many of them they themselves are in trouble, but the model, it's been shown how flimsy the model is, and I really a lot of them will not survive this period.
Steve, thank you very much, and it was an excellent talk with you. Please stay on live. We are just cutting the live session. We will ask you some little bit more questions, like 10 or 15 minutes. Hopefully, you have spent so much time. Gökberk, we can